Okay, welcome everybody to Cyber Crisis Chronicles. It's a four-part series exploring cybersecurity response and the steps before, during, and after. My name is Gary Mary. I've been in the industry for a long time. I started off as a C developer who, in the oil industry, who progressed into retail, became a CIO, a COO, and ultimately a CEO in the both scanning industry as well as most recently in the external asset identification and protection through a SaaS. And so now I'm working with SOClogix, which is a security operations center that I'm proud to be part of, in that I think the future of cybersecurity is in the hands of the SOCs. And I think that, part of this battle we have that we're fighting has to be done at a different level. And I think that's done through the SOCs. And Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Matt Johnson, CEO of SOClogix. We are, as Gary stated, a security operations center. Been around in this iteration about 10 years, about 14 to 15 total through an MSSP and some other businesses that we started. Much like Gary, I didn't start as a C programmer, but I started as a break-fix jockey for a government contractor, just fixing computers that they sent me parts for. Moved up to network manager. I moved an entire hospital one time. Moved our entire network department. That was a lot of fun. Then went to medical imaging where, I really dealt in security through programming, security through HIPAA and patient privacy. Shortly after that, started my own company, doing IT consulting, which branched into what is now SOClogix, to become a what we call premier cybersecurity, strategic cybersecurity partner.
Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about this four-part series. So today we're going to talk about the first part, which is the moment of truth, which is detecting when you detect or are informed of a cyber breach, or you've confirmed a cyber breach. And one of the things we want to talk about is how breaches are discovered. And it almost, in between Matt and I, we have seen and or made every mistake I think possible. Certainly in my case. But it never comes at you the way you think it will. You think that, well, it'll be, someone will call you and say, this asset has a problem. You've been breached. We know this because this machine or this asset has told us that something's wrong. But that's usually not it. I mean, primarily the cardholder industry, you'll get a call from the member bank or the card processors themselves and say, hey, we have vectors that are pointing towards you that show that you've in fact been breached. And it's in the cyber world, you're guilty until proven innocent. It's not, anything about being innocent until proven guilty. The moment those vectors show that you're the breached party, you're breached, and you've got to prove to what extent. And what they do, certainly from the card industry, is they look at the last time the cards were used correctly, non-fraudulently, and then they look at when they were used fraudulently the first time thereafter, and they shoot a vector. And after they get a certain weight of vectors pointing towards a given store or a given group of stores, famously the big Target breach years ago, I think they had 100% of their POSs were infected. So, you'll get a call, and that call will be, hey, you've been breached. And it won't be what's been breached. At that point, you really have to have a plan.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
They're not going to tell you what to do. That's not their problem. Their problem is to report, and your problem is to react. So, man, I know you've seen in your red teaming days, you've seen about everything that can be done, but how are some of the ways that you've seen?
I've seen just about every way. We've gotten an email from a customer saying that they think a client's been breached. We've gotten a call, not necessarily a call. We had one time the FBI show up at a client and be like, hey, your email address is showing up on an Iranian list of actions that they're taken against. We've had one of our customers one time called us because they logged into a server and there was somebody on there attempting to copy data off.
Wow. I think one really interesting thing is that with the phishing abilities today, it used to be you could get an email and there was something grammatically wrong, or there was something that didn't quite look right, used the wrong phrase or
wrong phrase, wrong spelling, but they're so good nowadays.
But today these large language models, these GPTs and the rest of them, the emails are perfectly formed. and they are unbelievably hard to detect. I think even imagine anything that can go used for you can be used against you nowadays for sure. But imagine getting an email or a communication, a SMS or a call from someone, just making sure that it's actually the member bank and not somebody trying to fish you.
Yeah, I mean, email phishing, especially with artificial intelligence now, and threat actors, moving operations to different locations. They've definitely gotten smarter. Through proper training, you can identify them quickly, usually. But we've definitely seen an increase in business email compromise. I think 87% of the red teaming we did last year, the initial outbreak was caused by a phishing attempt where someone got a link or an invoice, opened it up, and clicked on it.
I think the very first step in how a breach is discovered is understanding how you would be communicated to and taking the time to call your card processors or your ISOs or call the companies that would be necessarily communicate with them specifically around how would you communicate to me and how do I set up a two-factor callback. Personally, in the retail business, I've been I was at a vendor party in Manhattan one time. A guy walked up to me. He was actually our POS provider. They've sold and resold since, but the POS provider, the guy said, "Hey, jokingly, I hear you guys lost your keys." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's funny," and laughed it off. Then turned around, walked off, and got my CISO on the line. And I said, "Hey, why does this guy think we lost our keys? Did we lose our keys?" We did our own fraud detection, so we were communicating the card numbers back to the corporate office where we were not processing, but scanning them. And so pre-screening them, I should say. He said, "No, that's ridiculous. First off, why would they even have our keys? Why would they be storing our keys, let alone us losing them? They're in a vault." And wind forward a little bit, and we got a call that, he, in turn, our CISO, called someone on the POS side, and somehow or another, it got to the point where we found out that there was this summer intern in our catalog department that was going to school for an IT degree of some sort. And he decided to write a paper on how the insider threats could possibly work. So he had gotten a job as a summer intern doing outbound calling in our catalog division. But the only thing this man had was a caller ID that said the name of our company. And he called every single one of our vendors. He went out to the smoking table, got to know the POS team, knew every vendor, called every vendor. Every single vendor responded with information that could be used inside information that allow him to actually take information out of our company. And one of the things he did was he called our POS provider, said, "Hey, this is such and such with our POS support." They look down, they see the company's name on the caller ID, so they know it originated from inside of our company. And they did, in fact, have our encryption keys, and they did, in fact, provide him with those encryption keys.
So I'm assuming you got legal involved and it became a whole thing, because that's not necessarily something that an employee working in your catalog department should be doing.
Well, there's a couple lessons. One is you got to know who you're talking to, and your vendors have to know who they can talk to. And talk about making a mistake and getting lucky. We made a mistake in that we allowed these very first thing we did was got rid of caller ID on our outbound calls. So it didn't say our company's name. But then we systematically called all of our vendors and made sure we had a two-factor where we would call them back and they weren't able to provide any information. And then obviously we had to make sure that our encryption keys weren't
compromised,
stolen
or taken out.
I mean, I remember sitting in the conference room with this young man, him being super nervous and him saying that he hopes his parents didn't find out about this. There's no real reason to call them, right? And I was like, you better hope your parents find out about it because we called the FBI and they're on their way here. I go, you've committed a severe, a crime. I don't know what happened with them, but I know that they got to the level that we weren't sure that he hadn't shared that information. It wasn't just that he had it; it was what did he do with it in the forensics therein. And the point being here again, confirming the fact that who you're speaking to about your breach is in fact who you think you're speaking with. And they are very good at pretending to be somebody else.
Yeah, I guess for that one, we talked about this one before, but I'm pretty sure if that kid had come to you, as you being CIO and been like, hey, I have to write this college research paper. Here's what I want to do. Can we do this on the books? That would have been a fantastic project for somebody to do. Some great internal red team or internal purple team, and could have found out a lot of stuff.
I probably would have hired him, but not after he had received the information, because at that point,
he had committed a computer.
At that point, he had a Gmail account, and he was putting the information into that Gmail account to write his paper. It had gone too far. If he'd come with the idea, I would have treated it like a pen test.
Right.
Instead,
you could have got a lot of good information out of that.
Yeah, we definitely learned our lesson about knowing who we're talking to and our vendors being held to that. Our vendors can't just speak to somebody and say, look, just anybody and say this has happened. So I think the very first thing that we're talking about from, how the breaches are discovered is, first off, make sure you know who and how will in fact report your breach. And hopefully you have a SOC, and that SOC calls you up directly and says,
and that would be the most preferable method. You have a SOC, they call you, you immediately pull up your hard copy, as I'm famous for saying, your hard copy incident response plan that has your contact phone tree and every step that you need to provide and go through. And that should really help you get through that incident. But the first thing is, if you don't have that in hard copy, you're going to be out of luck if your systems get ransomed or encrypted or even, deleted or stolen. So make sure that, you build a very comprehensive incident response plan, got a phone tree, insurance information, step-by-step remediation, and have it printed out and accessible so that anyone in your organization gets that phone call, gets responsible, they can jump on it.
Absolutely. CIO, I had a little piece of paper I kept folded over in my billfold, and it had all the numbers I needed, be it the FBI, be it my corporate counsel, my CEO, my CFO, et al.
Yeah, I think another good piece, if you're a CIO, CISO, CEO, see something of a company, president, in your phone, you should have contacts for whoever's handling your incident response, whether it be your security operations internal team or your external security operations team, manager, CEO, owner, the direct number to a local FBI office, and know how to get a hold of them. And even try a couple, do tabletop gaming and practice runs where you call those numbers and make sure you're getting the response that you need.
Yeah, we had a policy, not just in the BlackBerry days, but post-BlackBerry, where if you held a corporate phone or if you're a corporate officer and it got lost, we would break it. We would throw a poison pill down the line, and we would delete all your contact. We would delete everything we possibly could. It's not as easy today, but we used to be pretty good at that. So that's why I carried a little piece of paper in my pocket. I always knew if I lost my phone, which he would do. As soon as I did, as soon as I let my team know, no matter who you were, you lost your phone, we bricked it immediately. Yeah. Absolutely immediately.
And then it's very common through MDM tools and other things. Companies and employers can brick phones for employees who lost corporate devices. Obviously, they should be corporate devices. You shouldn't be bricking your employees' personal machines or devices, but yeah, very, very common today and should be done.
Yeah, absolutely. It just takes a little while. And I think it's important, Matt, that, if you're in charge, you don't have to be a CISO, you don't have to be a CIO or CTO. You can just be a director of IT. You're the CFO and IT reports to you and directly. If you're responsible for IT, you should, in fact, have at least the beginning or the sketching of an incident response. And in that incident response, and there's two things out there that you can be. You could be three things. One is lucky. One is you could be in progress, meaning I'm trying and I've got it going and we're continually building it through partnerships, hopefully with a SOC. And third is you can be negligent. Negligent means I needed to do this. And the moment you're negligent, that's the moment that you go out to the HIPAA wall of shame and all of that, those big fines you see, the PCI fines you read about, all of those things. Those are people who are negligent. And if you're making best effort and you tried and you just got unlucky, you've got a pretty good possibility of not being beat up by your own industry standard.
You really don't want to throw lucky in there, though. I don't know. Lucky is one of those things for me. Like, you're just really throwing the dice down and hoping that you get snake eyes, because everything has to roll exactly your way in the middle of an incident response. And preparedness is definitely the way to be. You can be in progress preparedness, like you say. Most of our clients and people are always in progress preparedness because we're always changing and adapting. That's why we run the tabletop games and test the incident response plans. Because they might change software in the middle of the year or change hardware. The previous plan doesn't work with
Yeah.
what we have.
Yeah,
But if you're negligent, that's just you're going to wind up in some ransomware's chat group, or they're going to blast all your files and information out on the internet or the dark web, as we love to call it. And that loss of reputation and that loss of client confidence is what will kill your company.
Yeah. And I think the important message here on how breaches are discovered is making sure that you've done some work before, because no matter how they're discovered, and it won't be the direction you thought it would be, more than likely, your preparedness means everything as far as the outcome, not just inside of your industry standards, but also you as a corporation. We have a plan. The plan didn't expect this. We're learned. We've changed it, etc. But the fact is I think it's true. I mentioned the industry standards, but also on the insurance side. I mean, negligence is the last thing an insurance company wants to hear, and you could quickly become uninsurable.
Very easily. We had recently where a client contacted us because all of their cyber insurance was dropped because their insurance company ran just an external kind of like risk profile or external scan, ran it against them, found a bunch of open assets and open ports and services that weren't secure, and told them they were uninsurable. And in fact, that report went to all the cyber companies, not just one.
Yeah, in order for that to happen, you just almost have to be negligent. I mean, they find some stuff. You're always going to find some stuff, and you should be thankful when they do, because that gives you the opportunity to plug the holes and fix the little things. But when they come to you and you're like, oh,
I don't know.
Yeah, or I'm not sure whose responsibility that is, et cetera. So you're going to get a notification. You should know, and you should have set up already a line of communications that you can trust. If not, you're just as apt to be breached through the breach notification itself. Making sure you've done some prepared, and making sure that when you do that prep, you in fact have partners. You can say, hey, Matt, take a look at this. What are we missing? And just run it past them. And that's the beauty of having that trusted partner outside of your organization. And that's mostly, hugely important when it comes to companies that can't afford a CISO or can't afford a CIO. And I don't know what the statistics are, but everyone knows that in the United States specifically, you're being asked to defend yourself against the world. So you're a business, you're a golf organization in Florida, and you take credit cards, you are being pitted against nation states. Now, there's all kinds of things out there that kind of help to protect you, but ultimately your defense is your defense. And to think that a golf organization in Florida can defend themselves from China or a Russian hacker or even internal things, no one really believes that they could defend themselves. And when I say luck, it's really about, the time between you're lucky and you're not, in the preparedness that you put into it. So you may not be able to defend yourself against China from a hacker's perspective, but you can prepare yourself and show that you did the best you could. You fought the best fight you could. And it goes a long ways, I think.
Yeah, we have a couple of sayings. But one of the ones we have here is our job necessarily isn't to keep the hackers, the threat actors out. It's to keep them out long enough that they move on to the next target. What our other saying is, we have to be right 100% of the time. They only have to be right once. And if they're right that one time, they're in your network. But we have to be right 100% of the time to keep them out of your network. So the longer we keep them out and the less cost effective it becomes for them to act and break into your network, they move on to something else. Easy targets. Don't make yourself an easy target.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about initial response time or steps, the initial response steps. So you get a call, you've done your work, you know that this is the person you should be talking to, without a doubt. That this person, you have a two-factor, you call them back. You use two-factor today, don't you, when it comes to notifications, Matt?
Yes.
How does that
we
work?
we actually have like a couple of factors. So if we know that there's a threat with our clients, we send them a ticket At the same time, we open up a Teams room for most of our clients where we've already established Teams parameters, so we know that we're trusted back and forth. And we'll open a Teams room with our reaction team and their reaction team so that we can immediately start running through any IR playbook we've created with them. And that's with pretty much every client that we work with. We'll send a ticket at the same time, open up the Teams chat room to start moving through the process.
Yeah.
And we don't close that Teams chat room until both myself and the owner of what either the president of a company or if it's an MSP, the owner of the MSP, someone on the other side, we both have to sign off and say this incident's been completed. We've gone through the entire steps. Here's some changes we might want to make to the playbook, and then we'll close out the room.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what needs to be done. And that's, the main reason
that's part of all the preparation too. I mean, it took us a couple of years to develop that system because we were doing trial and error and seeing what worked best. And so far, this one with the advance of almost everyone's on Teams except for some people on Slack. We also can use Slack. This just allows us to respond quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the main reason you and I wanted to do this series was to give, everyone a little bit of advice from the worlds that we've lived in our experiences. And hopefully as people listen to this, they write down little to-dos for themselves. If we have one company that does one thing that ends up saving that company, I think you and I have done our job.
I think so.
For the initial response, I think for me, when it comes to containment and assessment, initial response for me, from my perspective as a CIO or as a leader, is to make sure I have a team that's accessible, that I have a call out list, I have a number, and I can throw a flag and say, hey, we think there's a problem here. Everyone, let's circle around this. Everyone get on this call. Here's the number. Or we've already done this a few times in prep and making sure that everyone who's responsible for the different layers or the different segments of the business or the technology is part of this, because it won't be one hero. It'll be a group effort to make sure that this thing is ultimately identified and we start taking action. So for me, from a leadership perspective, the first thing I want my team to be aware, and I want to hear what their steps are going to be.
Right. And you also want to, in your incident response plan, step 1 or 2 should be contact my cyber insurance provider, because what they're going to do is they're going to activate their plan for you at the same time, which means they'll get you a breach attorney who will start putting any information under privilege so that they'll help advise as to what to say, what not to say, what to put in writing, what not to put in writing. And 9 out of 10 times they'll bring in a forensics team for after. The forensics team is great for knowing afterwards, so you can go back and find out how the breach occurred, but really that's not step 1 or 2. Step 1 or 2 is getting prepared, identifying what has been excessed and get it contained. And that's where the law firms and the forensics firms and their IR teams can come in and help. And one of the things that we do, just as a quickly, is we know that insurance companies throw a lot at clients because they're throwing in lots of people. You're going to be on like 7 Google Teams messages meetings a day. So we do kind of what we call executive breach coaching, executive breach response, where we may not do the forensic or the IR work for you, but we can act as that liaison between you and your insurance company so that we can help guide you, especially through your board process or your own internal process, because while the forensic team is there and the attorney's there and they work for you because the insurance brought them in, they're still trying to protect the interests of other people. So you really want to make sure that, you have someone there that's looking out for your firm and your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And a little bit of time with your insurance company prior to any kind of an incident is golden, because again, they know that you're reaching out and you're getting advice from them. And the insurance is a big player, not just from the fiscal perspective, but also from the expectation and the technology perspective. And I think, for me, along with that incident response plan, there's really 2 documents that I always focus on when it comes to my incident response. One is an asset inventory. Asset inventory is something that I think most people believe they have some degree or another. Oh yeah, we know what we own, we know what we use. But until you really sit down, first off, you probably don't. You probably think you do, but until you take it and you match it against not just the business organization, but the asset itself, and the asset could be It used to be all the assets were these black rectangles with green blinking lights, but today,
But now we have little things, big things, IoT devices, wireless devices, personal devices.
it may not even be on the planet you're standing
Right.
on. Yeah. And so having an asset inventory, I think, means everything, because you get this call and you're like, okay, we've been breached. You get everybody on the line. You're like, hey, we just got a notification that there are vectors pointing to us. Where do we start? Okay, we know it's a credit card thing, or we know it's PII or PHI. Okay, these systems handle that, et cetera, et cetera. But without that asset inventory, you're just guessing. And time is of the essence here. And again, you don't want to be negligent. You're standing around saying, well, what do we have? Well, let's call such and such, and they know what we have. Well, no, that's not the deal. The other side of that asset inventory for me has always been a hybrid network diagram. I've always looked to my network diagrams to give me sort of a physicality, not necessarily, I shouldn't say physicality, but a location from a business perspective and possibly the platform that it's running on. So as a CIO, there was always three things I always had. One was a call out list that was well rehearsed. Two was an asset inventory that was as accurate as we could make it. Assets change, definitions change, products change. And so it's hard to keep an asset inventory up, but at least once a year we would revisit it. And the third thing was a hybrid network diagram that showed the devices. So at least we knew ingress, et cetera, when it came to
data points. Yeah, where data's flowing.
Yeah. Content, as much stuff as we could possibly get on the network diagram that was made it effective.
Yeah, we have definitely been involved in some ransomware cases, especially in 2024, where the source of infection was a machine that was thrown on the network that nobody knew about. Maybe not domain join, didn't get all the GPOs and extra software that it should have had. Combine that with SSL VPN that was exposed or something like that. Now you have a machine that's accessible and ready for ransomware.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, I think as we step through these 4 parts of this journey, I think we can clarify what these things look like. And we can also, as we post this out on the various platforms, YouTube specifically, and all the comments and other advice people give along these lines will be great. I think one of the things for sure is kind of what pitfalls can happen during early response. And I know that you're the head of red teaming, and you've been doing red teaming before there ever was a term called red teaming. Would you give a little bit of advice about common pitfalls?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of them that we've seen. One of them definitely we talked about with the incident response plan. Poor communication and coordination. If your team, especially your quick response team or whatever your organization calls it, doesn't know their roles and responsibilities, there's no communication plan, or you haven't included your executives from step one, there's a lot of things that could go wrong there, from, not 2 people doing the same job to nobody doing something that's important to no executive being involved in PR strategy or anything else that's needed to assist the company through the time.
Yeah, very good. Very good. For me, my common pitfall, the thing I have to keep myself on top of, are false positives, in that you get numb and, a normal business week, month, day, hour, especially in retail, you find things that you think, oh my gosh, I'm glad we caught that. Or you get a chance to review your syslog servers, and they use different things today. But back in my days in retail, we were constantly bombarded with things that could have possibly been, may have been, but then we found we had the right patch level, et cetera, et cetera. So false positives are the bane of the industry, in that they make you numb to what's going on around you. And so the biggest pitfall for me is believing, oh, that's just a false positive. Yeah, we know about it. And I used to, as a CIO, to select, give me every 10th entry in the log and prove to me that it's a false positive or a certain kind of false positive. Or today, take your ASM technology and show me the things that you believe are false positives and prove to me that they aren't. And so that numbness that comes around, in the biggest pitfall around false positives, and the biggest pitfall being believing that you're okay when you haven't proven that, in fact, you're okay. You need to take that time and you need to prove that, in fact, you haven't been breached. There's this whole statistic, and it used to be like a year from the time a breach occurred to the time it was reported, famously with Target. It was a full, I think it was a couple of years.
Yeah, it was a long time.
It was a long time. And you hear about it, and you're like, how can that be possible? How could you have a breach for a year? And the fact is that in the case of Target, they believed it was false positive. Lots of them. There was tens of thousands of warnings that, hey, you have a breach. And there were tens of thousands of people saying, that's that false positive, ignore it. Meanwhile, all along the way, it was in fact a positive, and it cost them $1 billion. So I think
we have a great saying. We do it with one of our customers. A breach is a breach until it's not a breach. Basically meaning that if we get something that looks like a breach, we work it as we would do any other breach all the way through the entire process until we can sign off on it not being a breach. And we would rather do 10 of those a day to deal with one real breach that we missed, because that one miss.
Absolutely. And so for me, that's the biggest common pitfall that I constantly had to make sure I wasn't falling into, or my team wasn't. You're so busy. There's so many things going on. And especially for a small business, you're probably not wearing one hat. But, the things that you have with the relationships you have with your MSP or your SOC or whomever, and when they throw up a warning flag, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your business to prove that it was real or not. And, hopefully there'll always be false positives.
Yep. There always will be. You're never going to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Work them like you would work a real breach so that you can, one, learn from them, and two, essentially make sure that, that you don't get false positive fatigue.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it'll wear you down. It will wear you down. And I think that's maybe, we talk about the things that the scorecard, as it were, from a cybersecurity perspective, and that breaches continue to increase and ransomware is skyrocketing, and we're all panicking about that in all the different industry verticals. But the fact is that what the bad guys do and what the good guys do are basically the same thing. And so it's all about intent. So when you're looking at those false positives, you've got to have the intent of the bad guy, not the good guy. And so why are we continuing to get beat on our own turf, our home court? It's because all the things the bad guys are doing, the good guys are supposed to be doing. You have to be able to receive spreadsheets. You have to be able to communicate through email. You have to be able to communicate. Stuff's got to go out. Stuff's got to come back in. It's got to be distributed. So the hard part is that common sense approach of looking at the data through the right lens, from the right angle, in keeping yourself, at least to the best of your ability, safe by the information you have. And I think when I say the future of cybersecurity is through security operations centers, I mean that mainly because of that story I was talking about, having the small businesses trying to defend themselves with China. I mean, you got a company that doesn't have a CIO, doesn't have a CISO.
Don't have a real IT department. They're just,
and we're expecting them. We're expecting them to defend themselves from China.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
Come on, So I think that consolidation into the centers, the security operations centers, with the right amount of oversight and the right standards around those, really is the future. Look, as we go through this series, the first part we talked about today was a moment of truth, which is, where are you going to get informed? How are you going to get informed? And what do you do to get yourself prepared for that, to not be negligent? What are your initial responses, key stakeholders, et cetera, and some of the common pitfalls? Next week, or the next series, I should say, the next segment of this series is crisis control, which is incident response and mitigation. Now you've gotten the breach. You found out that it is a breach. What's next? The third part of the series is how to rebuild and restore and recovery. And then, of course, finally, we're going to talk about how to move forward stronger than you were before the breach. And so that'll be coming up pretty soon. We're going to post this. If you have ideas, if you have some things you'd like for us to clarify, please ask. We want this to be an educational series. We want it to be interactive. If you've got some ideas, some things we've missed, some things you like, some things you want us to focus on. We can catch up as we go through the different segments as we go.
And if you have ideas for our next segment after this one, let us know too.
All right. Thank you very much for watching us. Good luck.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Take care.